When you realize that everyone you encounter is living their own vivid and detailed life, that's called Sonder.
So I'm here at the Rio Grande Bible Institute. Thank you for having me, Bill. I really appreciate it. I hope that you get the road finish that we were working on. So most people don't know, but you've been a friend of mine since, 13, right?
Yeah, you were 13 when you went to work with me. I knew you before that.
Oh, yeah. My dad probably talked a lot about me in my rebellious stages. But for those that don't know, Bill lived in Brazil for 20 years. Yeah.
81 to 2001.
And you also served over in Vietnam on the...
I was in the Navy from 67 to 71. I spent part of 68, 69, and 70 in Vietnam.
Okay. And how was that?
War is war.
Yeah.
I wasn't directly a combat outfit.
Right, you told me.
We hauled small craft back and forth between Vietnam, the shipyards in the Philippines or Japan for 8 months, and then I ran the rivers for 13 months hauling supplies for everybody up the rivers.
Mm. You did tell me there was sometimes you thought that you probably should have been in a situation where gunfire was...
Oh yeah, we were very close to, one time in Long Tao, I think it was, we were beached and the tide went out, so there was no possibility of us moving. We were on LST, and the Harbor Patrol found a Viet Cong mortar set up and zeroed in on us, and they had started firing, and they were discovered that we were sitting ducks. Another time we ran aground in a river, way upriver, went around the wrong side of a sandbar and went aground, and it was known for a lot of action. All those small Vietnamese boats disappeared very quickly, and we sat there until the tide finally came up enough to back the river up and throw us free. We never got it. One time we were going down through Rocket Alley, another place along the river, hot spot. And one of the guys in the engine room pumped water to our diesels, and everything on the ship went dead. And
so you're sticking in the mud, basically.
Well, we started heading in towards the bank. They got the anchor overboard in record time, got it stopped, and then we put our 2 boats in the water to keep us pushed out in the middle of the current. Again, we never got nailed, and why we didn't, I don't know, but we didn't.
Did you pray during that time?
No, I was very rebellious and out of fellowship with God. I knew Jesus Christ as my Savior, but I turned rebellious when I was preteen, actually. And I was so miserable when I was in Vietnam, it really didn't matter to me. At least I didn't think it mattered to me whether I lived or died.
It tends to happen. What made you join the Navy in the first place?
Well, part of it was my dad was at Pearl Harbor. He was in the Navy all the way through World War II. His dad had been in the Navy World War I. His great uncle had been a sailing ship captain from Norway. And
so just a history.
And I just, as far as the branches of service, I thought I liked the Navy better than any of the rest of them for several reasons. And I had tried to volunteer when I was 19, didn't pass the physical, and then later, after I was married a couple of years, Vietnam was warmed up and they wanted warm bodies, and they classified everybody in my classification back to 1A, and I took a GRAF physical and passed it, so I immediately joined the Navy.
Huh.
Had the idea of a career, but it didn't take long for me to change my mind.
Suppose not. With the situations, I had a couple of uncles and stuff over there, and some of them weren't quite as, I wouldn't say sheltered, but just, they saw a lot of action and stuff, and you can definitely tell that it has affected them in some way or form. Back to Brazil. So 20 years there. You want to tell everyone what you and you were married to? Yes, you were.
Oh, yeah.
By the time you got
We've been married. Let's see, we've been married 15 years when we went to Brazil.
Oh wow.
And we got married when we were 20, and we were 35 when we got to Brazil. Our two boys were 12 and 5, and I thought that I was going to do a lot of maintenance and so on, which I did a certain amount all the time that we were in Brazil, but I ended up doing a lot of things I never dreamed of doing. I taught in a Bible Institute a couple of semesters. I taught theological education by extension in a lot of different places. I organized evangelistic campaigns, even though I didn't do any of the speaking, but I would arrange for speakers and films and all that kind of stuff. God used us in starting a couple of churches in different places. And we got a lot of experiences.
Now those churches are you recently. I was on the phone with you and you were headed to Brazil. Those churches are thriving.
I went back to the last place we lived in Brazil 2 years ago now. It'll be 2 years in May. And they were celebrating 20 years since they were officially organized before the government. We were there. It was more than that since the church started, but to actually be registered now. And they invited me to come down and speak for their celebration, which I was able to do.
Oh, that's good. And is there anything you would have changed about it?
Down there?
Or?
Oh, yeah, lots of things. Lots of things. Our church, for one thing, started with young people, high school kids, junior high kids, a couple of college kids, and
are they
now
still
they're married and got kids of their own. Some of them got kids the age they were when we were there, and or older, and the town that we were in the last 8 years, when we were there, it had one of the highest percentages of bicycles to population in any city in the world. And now you hardly see a bicycle. It's all motorcycles and cars.
It's crazy how things change with time, isn't it?
There's traffic lights. There's it changes. So I got lost, honest to goodness, in the town that we'd lived in for 8 years.
That happens. When I come back home to Central City, it's definitely still the same, but it's different. And it's kind of what happens with the passage of time.
A few of the old landmarks, but boy, it changed a lot.
Yeah. And so you and Sandy have been married,
be 55 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say 50, but you guys she cooks really good. Yeah, I love her cooking.
It's funny because she didn't know how to cook a thing when we got married.
That's often I hear that's the case with most couples is one person doesn't know how to cook or they both don't know how to cook and somebody takes it up because of the kids. So,
Well, I knew how to cook, but as soon as we got married, I turned it over to her. We ate lots of burnt offerings for a few years, but she's turned out to be a very good cook, yes.
Well, it takes time and practice like anything, And, when you, so, let's just go at 19. At 19, did you think you were going to do all that?
Oh, no.
Like, where did you imagine yourself as a teenager?
When I was 19, I didn't expect to live past 50 at the very oldest. I was living wild. Even though I had my good times, I was miserable inside.
Right.
And I took every kind of chance. I worked dangerous jobs. I played dangerous sports. Anything to try and fill the emptiness in my life. And when I met Sandy the first time we went out, I spent the whole evening telling her how much I was against marriage. 6 months later, we were married. But
sometimes that happens. I mean, you've worked on everything from an oil rig to a refinery to truck stuff. I mean, when I talk to you, you tell me everywhere you've been and all the things you've done. And it's just
a lot of different things, and it was due to the emptiness in my life. I couldn't find anything that would satisfy me, and
right.
so everything was just an experiment. Even marriage, we after a year, I was ready to quit. I told Sandy I wanted a divorce after I went in the Navy, and fortunately, God didn't allow it to happen. But yeah, it was just nothing would fill the emptiness in my life, and
I think a lot of people nowadays are struggling with that. I mean, in my industry, I definitely see it, and I don't know. I don't. It's one thing to talk about God in front of people, and some people turn the other eye, and some people don't want to hear it, and some people, it's just it's difficult to try and reach out to some people. So I can get that 100%. And,
it's actually, I found it far easier being a foreign missionary. Because the fact that I was a foreigner opened doors to me that I wouldn't have in this country. And even though people weren't, eagerly waiting to accept Jesus as their Savior, they were open to talk. And I hear most people aren't even willing to talk about the subject. It was just, to me, it was easier.
Right. Well, I think that has to do with our society. We live in a world where we, especially now with all the social media, where we have to appear like everything's well put together, perfect. We're on this pedestal, and and most of I recently made a post about the craziness going on right now with the virus and everything, and how it's affected my travels, and how I've been getting messages from and talking to people from various parts of the world and in the United States, and how it might be possibly affecting my job. But it it never ceases to amaze me how some people can ask me how I'm able to do some of the things that I'm able to do. And, oftentimes, whether it be, running with the bulls or jumping out of a plane, or especially my job, there's times when things get out of my hands that I do pray and hope that everything works out for the best. And so far it has. So it's kind of, it's crazy in a way how we like to act like we got everything oriented, and then when we talk to somebody and I think a lot of people here have that guard about them that they just, I don't know, because when I go over to other countries, it does seem like it's a lot, like several people, regardless if they spoke the English language, were willing to talk with me and tell me what was going on and stuff. And it's just, I don't know, it's just weird how different our culture is compared to the rest of the world. Sometimes I think
differences.
I think we could learn some things from other places, but who am I to say? And so when you met me, I was 13. I was, man, that seems like ages ago now that I'm this old. It was a very transitional period. Sean had stepped in and married my mom and became a father, and obviously there was some differences there. I think he had a conversation with you, didn't he, at the mechanic shop or something? How did that?
Well, yeah, he expressed concern because you were a little bit wild, and your mom had to go back to work, and he was working, and school was getting out, and that meant you'd be running on your own, and nobody wanted to put up with you, including your granddad.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I couldn't pay you much of anything, but if you wanted to work with me, I'd let you work with me. And so you came, and we had a good old time busting up concrete.
Yeah, I remember that.
Pooped out pretty good until the neighbor kids come over, and then had to show off a little bit. And so it kind of renewed your strength. And that started a real friendship.
Yeah. And it's weird because a lot of people, well, shoot, you're 75, right? Almost.
I'm going to be 75 when we
Yeah,
turn it on.
yeah. Well, happy early birthday. But when I tell people I have a friend that's 75, they look at me like I'm nuts.
We're still people.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't really know. You're visiting a friend. What are they like? And I'm like, well, he's a senior citizen and he's 75, and explain to them, and they just look at me like trying to put the puzzle together, and it's crazy how sometimes things work. And I know, obviously things went down a different path than I would have liked. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that the route things went definitely shaped me into the person I am today. And by no means am I perfect, but at 13 years old, I didn't think I would be climbing cell phone towers or going to different countries or traveling as much as I have, and really actually thoroughly enjoying it for the most part, besides, places closing down and not allowing public to come in. But, that's just for our protection. So, and, I hope that things even keel as far as the parents and stuff. I've tried to make amends on most of the things, but hopefully God works with them some way or somehow. And I don't know, we'll see. It's kind of where I'm at with that.
Well, whether you see changes in them or not, if you allow God to do a work in your heart, He will change you. And I've experienced that. I lived with bitterness most of my life, the way my folks did and didn't do things. And it's taken me many years to realize that some of the things they struggled with, and the fact that, to be completely honest, a lot of my reactions were just my reactions to things, because I have brothers and sisters that lived through basically the same thing I did, and they didn't end up as near as bitter and rebellious and so on as I did. So it wasn't because we lived in a different household or anything.
Right.
But some of those things just take time for God to do His work in your heart and your life, and you learn. And when you have kids and grandkids of your own, well, you feel some of the heartaches and discouragements and so on, and realize things. But God's been good. My dad was a survivor of Pearl Harbor, like I say, and I didn't really think about that much of any until just 3 or 4 years ago. I got a hold of a couple of books that Tom Brokaw put out about survivors of that time period, and one man that wrote his memories of Pearl Harbor was on a ship just directly behind the one my dad was on. And he was an eyewitness to the battleship Utah rolling over, and their ship almost rolling over, and a torpedo going right between them, the bow of their ship and the stern of the one my dad was on, the Detroit. The Detroit was the only one that got underway, and they picked up a lot of the survivors off the Utah. The water was covered with oil. A lot of it was on fire. That ship had rolled over and went down in something like 45 seconds.
Wow.
And it was a battleship, had a lot of men on it. And my dad saw and heard and smelled things that day that he never was able to forget. And yet he never ever talked about any of it. Now, how much that affected who he was and so on, I don't really know. But I realize now that my parents, in spite of their faults and so on, they were really trying as parents. And I never give them that credit for many, many years.
Well, I think sometimes, it's taken me at 29 years old to talking with friends that have kids and stuff like that, to realize, just how much they did. And, there's some regret that I have about that. And I'd like to take some of it back, but, we can't change the past. We can only change what's in front of us and plan ahead for the future as best we can. But I think, given the circumstances of everything that happened to me with the foster care and everything else, I think I far exceeded expectations most saw of me. I don't think people thought I'd be going to Spain and being part of the San Fermin Festival, or being published in a paper back home, or doing the kind of work I do, or hopefully, if everything goes all okay, to Australia. So, and I don't know. I think a number one thing a kid wants to hear from their parents is that they're proud. And while sometimes I wish they'd say that, sometimes I just accept the fact that I might not ever hear it, or they might just keep it internally and not tell me. That's okay with me. So I totally understand where you're coming from about the things and stuff that they have gone through, financially, both, and with whatever they had going. And I'm happy for my dad right now. He opened up his own shop and seems to be doing pretty well. And Mom was working, and Michael was actually supposed to be all-star athlete on the football team for the Nebraska All-Stars high school game, but I think that got postponed or canceled. So, and yeah, it's weird. It's how that kind of comes full circle once you start getting older.
Change your perspective.
Well, and I think a lot of the traveling that I've done has definitely full circled a lot of perspective that I didn't have. Actually, funny enough, I remember one specific thing. So when I was really little, my dad had gotten a can from Vermont of maple syrup. And one way or another, I got into the can, and it eventually spoiled the can, or so he said. But I told him one day I had to replace it. And he said, "How in the hell are you going to replace it? You're never going to go to Vermont. You're never going to be there. That's 1,000 miles away. Like, I'm never going to get another bottle of that stuff." And so we were in Maine working. Flash forward like 15 years later, we were in Maine working, and we actually went to Vermont to do a site. And right on the edge of the site, there was this shop on Hogback Mountain, and they sold bottles of maple syrup. So I bought a bottle of maple syrup, and I sent it back to them, and I told them, make sure you include me so I can try some of it, because I never really bought any for myself. And it was still there for like a couple months each time I visit, and I came back the last time, the bottle was just completely gone. And my mom, I looked at the bottle, and my mom was like, "That is some of the best maple syrup I ever had." And I was just kind of sitting there, and I was like, "Well, I would have loved to try some." But it's all good. I'm glad they enjoyed it. Now, oh shoot, I got 4 minutes. Hold on. But I guess one of my biggest questions is, like, when you saw the 13-year-old me, did you think you would turn out into the person, traveling during a virus epidemic down I-35, and some of the things I've done, I've always been curious about that question. They say that some people can see things that you often can't.
No, I saw a kid that was struggling, and I knew your dad, and he was struggling, and we were there, and I was able to help out a little bit. That was all. I'm no clairvoyant or anything. I knew, well, I know the struggles that I went through, and God's given me a love for people that, I was able to do it, so I did it. That's about all it amounts to.
I think it definitely played a role of how it turned out, for sure, 100%. Can honestly say that. I don't think there's, I don't really know. I'm dumbfounded, honestly. At that time, I think there was a lot of people that it just turned to the wayside. And I mean, it's funny that that happened then, and now with the direction I want to take my life. But I guess God just, I don't know, does things in His time and His way, and sometimes that requires taking people out of the picture or moving people. Or He's definitely a good chess master. I'll give him that for sure. But yeah, you were there at the right time. So thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So you do travel quite a bit still, even.
Yeah, we travel every fall for 3 months to Bible colleges and churches, encouraging other people to do what God wants them to be doing in their life in the place of His choosing. That's whether that means being in Brazil or being here at Rio Grande Bible Ministries or wherever. It isn't really important to us. It's if they respond to God's call in their life and put Him first in their lives. I've tried a lot of different things to fill the emptiness in my life, the hole in my life, and only God can fill it. And I wouldn't trade the years that we spent in Brazil for anything on this earth. We had times when, and I'm not nervous about all what's going on right now with the stores out of stuff and what have you, because I've already been through that. We saw God provide in Brazil. One time the inflation had gotten up over 2,000% a year. That's over 10% a day.
Holy cow.
And so if you got money, you spent it immediately. And because it was losing value every day. And our oldest son was getting married. We didn't have enough money for us all to go to the wedding, but Sandy, that was her firstborn. And when he was born, we were separated, and I had actually told her to get an abortion, and so on, a pretty bad deal. And so for most of the first 21 months of his life, she was the same as a single mother, because I was gone. I was over Vietnam most of that time. And so we bought plane fare for her to go to the States. Well, between the time that we made arrangements for that and the day that the flight left, we had a new president elected in Brazil that stopped inflation in one day. And he did it by, one of the things he did was froze all the assets in all the banks. And even as foreigners, we couldn't take more than $50 maximum out of the bank in a day. Well, we lived interior, rural area, about 5 hours away. I had to get the money for ourselves, our living expenses, plus the expenses of our camp. And I had payroll for guys that had been helping us with construction and so on to pay, and other expenses there at camp. Well, with what money I was able to get, it left us enough, Andy and our youngest son and I, we bought 1 kilo, which is 2.2 pounds of sugar, and took it home with us. And the rest of it, we lived on what we had in the house for a month. And I had to ration. I counted everything that we had and figured out a menu for the whole month and knew exactly how much we could eat a day. And that's the way we lived for a month. And we lived. We didn't starve and everything. You know, worked
gonna say
out.
you're still here.
And we saw other times too that you know, for one reason or another, we had to live on what was there. We never had in that area. We almost never saw potatoes, but we had rice and we had beans, and we lived on rice and beans a good share of the time. But we lived and we stayed healthy enough and so on. So the grocery stores being out of stuff for a while or so on don't faze me too much.
It's a little, yeah, well, it's one thing to have been through, it's another thing to see it for the first time.
Yeah.
It's definitely,
Right.
it's definitely jarring. It's especially jarring when you're like me and you're traveling through 3 different states and it's all the same story.
Right.
But I'm just hoping everything goes back to normal after this is all said and done. And hopefully it will. You know, you were talking about God's calling and stuff, and you know, I never felt. There was 2 times in my life I knew what I was supposed to do, and the first time it was when I was at a Bible camp, and they were I can't remember if it was the camp leader or the sermon we were at or what it was. It was giving myself to Jesus Christ, and the second time I felt something similar to that same, and it was a weird emotion. It was almost like a sense of peace, calm, happiness, and just and sadness and a multitude of emotions at once, and it just overwhelmed me. And I think when I stood up, I sat back down because I was just overwhelmed with the emotions that were coming over me. And I think I prayed pretty heavily at that point. And the second time was in New York, because you know, before I went to New York, about a year before that, you know, I tried and I failed to commit suicide. And before I went to New York, you know, I prayed a good deal, and I think I was calling you a lot at that point, trying to figure out, you know, what direction I wanted to go in life and stuff. And then once I got into New York, I went into this arch in Central Park. It's beautiful, by the way. You should totally check it out when the city's not in lockdown. But I went underneath the arch, and I spent time with people from different cultures and stuff that I never would have experienced at any point in my childhood. And I had that when I came. It was almost like I let go of the old Alan the same way I did when I was that 13-year-old at the Bible camp. It came through, and it came through to the other side, and the same, not the same, but similar emotions and stuff came over me, and I realized what exactly I was supposed to do. I didn't understand it at the time, or you know, have a set plan. You know, it's taken 2 years to figure it out, but I think it's you know, when you talk about feeling emptiness and all those emotions where you're just trying to fill the void, I didn't feel that after that day. And you know, and during the times that I was in a group home and it seemed like nobody was there for me, you know, I'd pray, and I was reading a lot at the time, and I was trying to figure out life. And you know, I never understood why I had to go through all those things. But I remember reading Job, and I remember that he understood that everything that was happening to him was for a purpose that he couldn't understand. And he specifically said that when his friends told him, you know, to turn your back on God and stuff like that. And I remember praying one time and telling myself, you know, I don't understand why any of this is happening to me. Don't understand why I'm going through all this pain and all this suffering right now. But I do understand that at some point down the road, I will figure it all out, and it will all make sense, and you'll show that to me. And at 27, when I went to New York, it pretty much clicked almost. It was weird how it just all it's almost like a flashback. They say when you die, you go back and you see your whole life. It was almost like every single thing that I had dealt with in my childhood and then my early 20s had prepared me for that point, and then it was just time to learn the next steps. So, yeah, I feel that a lot of people. I wish a lot more people knew the comfort that God can provide in difficult times as well as good times. But it's I don't know. I don't know if they have like iron hearts or what the deal is, or if they're just rebellious, like a 13-year-old, or what the deal is. But so it's been nice coming back and to see you. I don't know if I'll get another chance because nothing's promised.
No.
But I'm glad that we got what we did done out on the pavement and stuff. And a lot of my my coworkers were asking me, "Wait, you're working for free?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm working for free." And then they saw the picture of me getting a suntan. And it's just kind of funny how that came full circle at 13 years old.
Well, I worried about finances for most of my life. I grew up with more brothers and sisters than there was paycheck for my dad to go around for. Eventually there were 16 of us. I'm the oldest. And I grew up with that mindset of always wondering if there's going to be enough and so on. And it's only been in the last few years that I've finally come to the point that honestly for me, I can say I believe Matthew 8:28, where it says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." Well, if you read the context of that verse, it's talking about the necessities of life, food and clothing. And Jesus says repeatedly, he says, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I take care of the birds. I can take care of you. I take care of the flowers. I can take care of you. Don't worry about it. But it finally struck me, if I work full time for God, which I have been for a long time, then he is responsible for my finances. I don't have to worry. I can just flat forget about that part. It's his part. He says he'll take care of it, so fine, let him take care of it. And that to me has been tremendously freeing. If all the grocery stores run out, there'll have to be food from some other source.
Right.
But God's shown before that he can do that. He took care of Elijah when he sent him off down by a creek that went dry on him. Sent crows, which are scavengers, to bring him bread and meat every day for quite a time. Then the creek dries up, and he's the one that's really responsible because he's the one that prayed that it wouldn't rain. But God sends him then to a town, and he encounters a widow there, and God provides for her and for her son and for Elijah by means of this widow. And, the Israelite people, when they went out of Egypt, God provided for all of them, 600,000 fighting men plus families for 40 years in the desert. And they had large flocks. Now, how in the world they survived, I don't know, other than God provided for them. So it's no big deal for him.
Right.
It's been tremendously freeing for me.
It's good. And it only happens a couple times, but sometimes I'm necessarily, I don't know how to explain it. Like there's a second that I'm worried about my finances, and then like within that second, it just goes away. And
I haven't always been that quick for it to go away.
Well,
I've been subject to spiritual amnesia.
Well, I'm just, I'm trusting that like everything's going to be taken care of. You know, I've gone through enough, you know, from being homeless in a car to eating one meal a day in school and stuff to you know, in group homes, wondering where I was going to wind up in life because it seemed like there was no direction for me or outlet or anything. And you know, I'm at the point where I'm like, if he took care of me during all of that, and that's a lot more harsh of circumstances than now, then you know, I'm thankful that I have a decent job, that I make enough money, that I'm able to travel and stuff. And if he didn't want me to do all of these things, he'd obviously take it away. And so far, you know, crossing my fingers, he continues to provide. I mean, so far he has, and from the sounds of things, it sounds like we still got work. So it's just got to take the punches as they come. You know, I've had, and that's the other thing. You know, he's provided. I've talked to different people, and they've all told me, you know, if at any point you get stuck somewhere or something because of your job, you know, you can come here for a little bit and crash and figure things out. And I've never really taken anybody up on that offer, and hopefully I never have to, but the option's there. So, and it's just, I don't know. It's just different. I try to view what it would be like to be an atheist, and I can't imagine the amount of stress or the amount of worry or the amount of doubt that they have in their head. It's astronomically mind-blowing to me. Just, you know, it's me against the world, and I have to figure everything out. Like there's no way I could figure, you know, it's just nuts. So if you had, I don't know, specifically one thing to say with somebody that's in a similar circumstance to you that was trying to figure out what they're doing in life or where they were going or how they were trying to find peace, we'll just say trying to find peace, what would you tell them? I guess, I mean, I'm pretty sure I already know your answer, but
Well, faith is something that has to be exercised, and you don't fully trust somebody you don't know.
right.
And so the only way to truly know God is by the Bible, which is his revelation of himself. How else could we ever know him? We can't see him. We don't hear his voice audibly. We see evidence around us that he must exist.
I mean, even scientists have
in spite of those who do their best to deny that.
Well, even some atheist scientists have come forward saying there has to be an intelligence.
There has to be, yeah, exactly. I mean, just one little thing, an explosion never creates order.
Right.
An explosion causes destruction. It causes disorder, not order. And the marvelous universe that we live in can't possibly be as orderly and as structured as it is without somebody to structure it. But so the only way, though, to know the characteristics of God is for him to reveal those things, and he's done that in his word, the Bible. And you can check it out if you want to by any non-biased test that you can apply to the Bible. It proves itself to be true.
Right.
It just does. And the other thing is to decide who's going to be boss, yourself or God. And I came to the point in my life, first I came to the point of believing that the only escape from a bad destination in eternity was Jesus Christ. I knew there was a heaven, I knew there was a hell, and I knew that hell was my destination, and so somebody took care of things, and only Jesus Christ could do that. I was 7 years old when I made that decision, that I trusted him to keep his word and to save me for eternity. And then at 27 years old, one day on a tractor in eastern Nebraska, I got to thinking about my life and what a mess I'd made out of things. And I decided that day to allow God to be truly God in my life. I made a conscious decision, just like I had made a conscious decision when I was 12 to be a rebel. That day, at 27, I made a conscious decision to make God truly the Lord of my life.
Right.
And I said, whatever you want, Well, I've had to go back and redo that several times on this area or that area, this decision or that decision, but it was a once and for all decision. And that day, anytime I had to stop, there was this turmoil down in the very middle of me, where nothing could reach it, but it was always rolling around there. And that's why I didn't ever want to stop. I ran hard, I drank hard, I partied hard, everything to try to not feel it, not think about it. And I had to stop, and we all have to stop every now and again. It was always there, this churning, rolling unrest.
Yeah.
And that day, when I said, okay, you take over, I got peace down in the very middle of me like I've never had in my life. And there's things that disturbed my peace since then, but
for the most part, it's still
for the most part, it's been there. That's right. God restored my marriage. God restored my family. Restored the years that I had wasted. Like I say, I'm going to be 75 here next week from tomorrow.
Don't look a day over 50.
Still got pretty good health. I can still ride a motorcycle, which I dearly love. I still ride a horse, which I also dearly love. And God's been good to me. Very gracious.
It's good. It's good. I think that's about all I got before my camera runs out again. But thank you for allowing me to interview you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for hosting me multiple times here in the great state of Texas. That's currently out of ammo, which is crazy to think about. But
it's going to be a little hard to kill a virus with a pistol.
I don't think people are trying to kill a virus with a pistol. I think they're worried about other people trying to get them. But that's up to them.
Yeah.
So, but well, I suppose we've had a hard day of work. I'll let you get some rest, and I'll be headed out home tomorrow, and hopefully I make it. And probably will. He let me come down here in a rust bucket of a van, so must have been something he wanted me to do. So it's been good.
Good.